I'm Joe Rockey, and before we begin this episode of Father and Joe, I invite everyone to give us some feedback. In episode 383 and 384, we gave specific drills that you can implement in your life. What we are asking is, can you give us feedback upon implementing them and sending us the results to fatherandjoe@gmail.com. Thank you very much. And here is this upcoming episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about stuff that was going inside of me. And either 2 or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the promises of Christ. And in thinking about that episode, as I was going through everything in which we discussed in the last episode, a thought from a memory, I guess, appeared in my mind. And it's something that I think I understand why I was taught it when I was going through the process of my first confession and first Holy Communion. But it's also something that had never really been brought up in my adult life. And going through the process that we have talked about many times before of revisiting things in your past with your current older eyes can really illuminate some questions. And I had one of those pop upon me. And I distinctly remember being taught this. This following example I'll tell you here. I on the one hand, I see why it was told to a 6-year-old or however old I was when I was getting my first communion. But I know there has to be more nuance to this as an adult. And basically what I was told was that when you sin, St. Peter up at the doorway of heaven has his book for you. And when you sin, he writes it down. And when you go to confession, he deletes it off the list. But if you do the same thing again, he writes it down twice and it can never come off. So that's essentially the version I was told to a 6-year-old. Now, obviously, in our conversation about how confession works and all that, I get that part's not completely true. But I also get that you don't want to have a 6-year-old running around with the mindset of I can do anything bad and then it will just go away and never have any retrospect consequences. At some point, there has to be peace in a household where you're not constantly throwing things. I get that. But what this conversation I'm trying to hope in this episode is to essentially go down that line of how do we keep people from essentially taking advantage of God's mercy, and also understanding the full extent of it. Because I can see why I was taught what I was, and I also know why it's wrong, but I don't know how to do it right. So that's where I'm at, Father.
I mean, one of the basic things is that Peter would be, by doing that, would be denying the very thing that Jesus told him directly, which is to forgive 70 times, 7 times. It's just straight in the face of Scripture and the Lord's revelation of His endless mercy. Yeah, I think we tend to have that kind of anxiety about people doing wrong things, and yeah, we sort of love people into the fullness of life rather than shaming and I don't know, punishing. Now things need to be corrected. 6-year-olds arguably are, first of all, not even have the capacity for reason. We don't send 6-year-olds to confession because
I could totally
we
have my age wrong. I was
give
just
some.
ballparking whatever it was when I was
Well,
in 6th grade.
anyway, but just to say, like, I mean, even the moral formation is a process that we go through. So I think well, having the positive approach, and this is what Catechesis of the Good Shepherd does, starting with the very young ones, but to focus on the baptismal garment and always keeping that baptismal garment clean is sort of the positive approach. And so when the baptismal garment, we don't want to get it dirty to begin with. And when we do, then confession is a place that we clean it. So that's a little bit more kind of positive, and then maximizing, keep it as clean as possible. We want to keep it as clean as possible. And then we can have discussions around, is that going to keep your baptismal garment clean? What are you doing there? So, uh, and that's, yeah, I I will have to admit, children are not my forte. So I've picked up a lot of things secondhand, particularly from the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. Some things land and they fit, and I want to be careful about not being too naive in terms of child psychology informing them. But it is a matter of, so what one of the things that happens in our humanity is our passions need to develop. Our senses develop. Your eyes grow by using them, your ears grow by using them, and then our feelings also grow by using them, and we want them to develop. And then our feelings are always responding to our perception. So if I perceive something as threatening, I'm going to get scared. Now, that thing may not actually be threatening. I know a lot of little girls that see my beard and my black habit and they feel threatened. Now, I'm not actually threatening,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to learn to match up the perception with the reality. But they also need to be told, affirmed in the feeling, like, oh, you felt threatened, didn't you? Yes. And let's look at that. Is father actually threatening? Oh, no, he's not. And now how do you feel? I feel better. So rather than saying it's bad to feel afraid, well, it's not bad to feel afraid. That's a response to a perception. Now your perception is a little bit off, and we can work with that. So validating feelings, being in attunement, helping to, trying to understand what the perception is. The child that is trying to get away with something perceives an apparent good, that somehow getting that cookie out of the cookie jar is like really good. And the desire, the love, the joy that goes with that is really good. So that needs to be counterbalanced against something, because as an adult, we know, well, it's not really good. There's some downsides to getting the cookie out of the cookie jar. It might be hard to explain that to a 6, 7, or 8-year-old. And that's where you apply a different set of consequences. No, it's not very good. And it's going to get you time out, because I told you it's not very good for you, and you listened to your perception rather than the perception I was trying to help form in you, and help to regulate your passions according to those realities. So um, anyway, how all of that works in the best way, I'm not an expert at child disciplining and formation, but I do know that invalidating feelings and not understanding perceptions, or even invalidating them, is not the right way forward. So in any event, the sort of fear tactics that are put on the confessional, like you're not going to be forgiven if you do this thing wrong again, that's a really bad idea, because it also is not in touch with reality. We can't form by lies. So that's has to be a fundamental principle. I can't have a false. I can't present a false version of reality in order to scare you into good behavior. This is the thing that always drove me nuts about some of the war on drugs propaganda when I was in high
Mm-hmm.
school. It was like, basically, if you smoke pot once, your life is going to fall apart. Well, no, it won't. And there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. Now, I'm not saying people should smoke pot. I think the ultimate message is correct, just like they wanted to communicate to you. Don't do bad things multiple times. Learn the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all in favor with that message. But creating a false version of reality to utilize scare tactics to get people to do for good behavior is not the right approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I 100% agree with that. So that makes so much sense, because I mean, you think about it, as adults, that's one of the fallacies of logic we're taught. It's called the straw man argument for those that go into it, creating a false narrative so you can put whatever message you want and railroad through it. So that's makes sense, but still, there has to be a mechanism, as you said in the beginning here. We want to focus on keeping our garment clean, or in this case, our soul. I'm assuming that's what you mean by the baptismal garment is a symbol for the soul in that analogy with the children. Um, but there still has to be a thought process that says, um, I'm not just going to come here, do this sin, and then go to the bar tonight and probably do all the same stuff all over again and have that be okay. So what is the answer in regards to that situation? Whether it be that specific element, but more to the core concept behind it.
Yeah, I mean that's what we talk about, having a sincere purpose of amendment, a firm purpose of amendment, that I'm planning on changing my ways. And certainly if I confessed with the intention of doing it again, I first of all don't have a firm purpose of amendment. Uh, if I confess and then know that I'll probably do it, but I'll be able to confess later, that's what we usually call the sin of presumption. I'm presuming that I'll have the opportunity, first of all, and presuming upon God's mercy, which I don't want to do. And all of that is a lack of perception. It's really reducing confession to a kind of uh, legal transaction that is a matter of, I don't know, getting away with something ultimately. And rather than recognizing what I'm doing is doing damage. I'm hurting myself. I'm hurting the church. I'm hurting God in a certain way. I'm participating in the passion of Christ. And this people will get caught up in this in another way, that having committed one sin, knowing they need to go to confession, they'll commit a few more sins before actually going, to sort of like, well, as long as I'm already in a bad place, it's like, as long as I already stole $100 and I'm now going to be liable for shoplifting, I might as well steal a couple other things. The police are coming, I might as well get my money's worth or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, don't do more wrong. And doing more wrong is doing more wrong. That's doing more damage. It's creating more problems. It's hurting ourselves and others more. Even if we've already done something wrong and we are going to have to account for that, confess that, be forgiven for that, that doesn't justify doing more wrong. And so that's the place that we need to look into in our hearts, is that whole thought process and what I'm giving myself permission to do there. That, of course, is a different thing than the real sincere intention not to do it again, but having a real addiction and compulsive behavior, and finding oneself, perhaps not surprisingly, in a place of sin again. Um, so working through those deeper motivations, the deeper currents, is something we've talked about in a lot of other episodes, in terms of how trauma factors into these things. And I mean, St. Paul himself said, I do not do what I want to do, I do what I hate. We find ourselves doing things that I never intended to do. When I confessed, I intended not to do it again, and here I am 3 hours later doing it again. And I'm shocked by myself. Okay, so that's another whole issue that we can spend some time trying to understand what are some of the underlying factors for that.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that in terms of when we talk about finding the underlying factors, you have given some great tools throughout it. But to paraphrase it, it's be gentle with yourself, be willing to listen to yourself, and not to feel the emotion in the terms of judgment as far as what you're looking back upon. It's not that you didn't answer it the way you wanted or you didn't respond the way you wanted, and to feel anger, guilt, whatever because of that, but to just go recognize it. And in doing so, maybe I'm special here, but I think it's going to be the common thread for everyone. You're going to start to naturally figure out those patterns that led to that event and make it so that at least that exact same version of creating an event you didn't want happens a little bit differently. And hopefully it happens more towards the direction of something you would want to happen, which again, presumably is going to be a good thing. So I think that is something that it's scary. I mean, it's scary to look back as far as the stuff that I did, and do I really want to think about what I did wrong? I mean, I think that's part of the reason people are afraid to go to confession. I don't even know if it's fear of talking to God. I think it starts with a fear of talking to yourself and realizing what did I do that was wrong and what were the consequences of me. Um, like even in looking back at that last episode, I kind of externalized all those feelings I was having about the fear of having to choose between my unborn baby and my wife. I kind of externalized all of it to this letter, and I made this whole apparatus around it. Now, do I know it was written by a lawyer? I'm very educated guess that it was, but I don't know that for sure. And it's very easy to externalize that I was having feelings that I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't like it. And in some regards, I was no different than my current 3-year-old is right now. I don't know what to do here. I don't like this. But difference being is I didn't physically manifest it into the world. I kept it all inside of me, which might be even worse. I don't know that answer either. But the point is that I get it. It is something that's scary to look in at yourself and to do this process. But to your point, that doing that and not coming in with the assumption of I want to do more evil, I want to do more damage, I don't want to maximize this trip to the confessional, for lack of a better way of saying it, and actually trying to realize, hey, we can do this right, and the healing is the forgiveness, and that will be granted. So I love the message there and how you're trying to communicate that. But again, with this being such a complex topic, I want to give you a chance to have the final word in today's episode.
Yeah, I again love that you have internalized these messages and can communicate them back so effectively. And just one thing to add to everything you said, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is uh, it is hard to face these things, hard to be honest with ourselves, hard to look ourselves in the eye. That's kind of the phrase we use sometimes. And one of the things that helps is the presence of another who attunes with us, who is in our corner, who understands our feeling, who is trustworthy, who loves unconditionally, someone that we can open it up with, and to use the psychological language, where there's attunement and co-regulation of emotions, it expands our window of tolerance, and I can face big emotions and actually look at them with some clarity. And that's a lot of what's happening. And that, maybe to come back to the example with children that we were talking about before, it's a basic thing, and it's something that women are particularly good at. Again, it's always dangerous when you make these generalizations, but if we can say that men are 15% stronger and larger than women on average, we can say that women are 15% more sensitive and easily able to attune in relationships. It's probably more than 15%. But it's one of the reasons that mothers are so important, especially at very young ages where children are less verbal and less self-aware, because mothers will tune, again, fathers can do this too, but parents can attune to their children's emotions in a way that they are able to sort of hold the emotion and help the child to feel it, get in touch with it, understand it. And that's going to shape the whole process of the passions of our emotions and continue to put them under the guidance of reason. And that's the formation process that you're, sort of leaning into. That doesn't happen by shaming and scaring, as the catechesis did for you, or tried to do for you as a child, but is rather a process of entering in together, understanding what's happening, attuning to the emotions, and expanding the window of tolerance. So all of that is to say, this process that we're talking about, facing what's going on inside of us, often, if not always, requires another who can enter into it with us, and who doesn't have to have the answers, but just the process of being attuned to the other, having somebody who's looking at it, can be curious and compassionate with me, can be gentle with me towards myself, is helps tremendously in having enough, being settled and stable enough to be able to look at hard things in particular that might be going on in me.
Yes, and that's the challenge for all of us going forward in this week, to be able to just have the courage to open up and to look into those types of elements. Maybe start with ones that your brain thinks is naturally easier to start with before we jump into super hard mode. There's no shame in that. But to go through and think about some things that we wish were different, and what it is that we could have done different without casting hindsight's emotion or energy into it. So, Father, I thank you for being with us, and we will be with you all next week.